Privet, Katila, Wanding Ruskidasu, and today this is the weekly Russo-Ukrainian War weekly update for the week of September 25th to October 1st, so the last week of September. So this week there's a lot of updates. Well, not a lot, but there's still a lot to talk about. So let's begin with the main axis of the Ukrainian attack, as usual, on the Robotina front or the Reka front. Now, there actually hasn't been any movement on this front, but there's still been some clashes. Now, now I wanted to talk about why there hasn't been any advancements of the Ukrainians on this front. Now, we got some geolocated footage this week, basically showing the Ukrainians are on the southern edge right here of Robotina, while the Russians are right on the outskirts of Novopokrovka here. So, so the Ukrainians are, very close to Novopokrovka, and very close to Verba, but they're not inside the village yet. They haven't even taken a house or so yet. Now, why are they stuck outside here? They've basically been stuck outside here for about 2-3 weeks now. There hasn't been really any advances here. Well, because they are in a firing bag, and I've explained this before, but they need to turn this from a firing bag to a more secure line. It'd be if the Russians had, let's say the Russians conquered these villages here and conquered these villages, right? And then basically this was the only line of support here, then this area would be in a firing bag. But it isn't, because the flanks are secure, and they're able to control this area. The same thing they're trying to do here. They made a breakthrough here, but they haven't taken Kopany, and they haven't taken Verba yet. They need to take these villages in order to make a new kind of front line here. So that is, they'll be able to consolidate the positions here. But they haven't. And because of Russian superiority in firepower, the Ukrainians basically have a very hard time to consolidate anything. And that's why we haven't really seen any advances here, because the way the Ukrainians are doing it is that they send vehicles about halfway through, they drop off the soldiers and the assault troops, and then they send the vehicles back. So then the people have to go by foot, to the front lines. And if they consolidate too much, then the Russians will see them and then just bomb them. And so that's why they've basically been doing assaults of maybe like 10 people. But, assaults of 10 people aren't enough to break through a line. So the Ukrainians are at a how do you say this, at a disadvantage, because they cannot consolidate troops to break through to Verba, break through to Kopany, because if they do, the Russians will find this consolidation and destroy it, or bomb it. And so that's kind of the predicament the Ukrainians are in. So that's why you haven't seen any advances. We've seen the Ukrainians move from trying to attack Verba directly to try to attack the fields to the south of it, because then if they break through here, they could then attack Verba on the side, which is a smart move, but they haven't been made any advances here this week. The reason why I look at this topographical map is that, so this is Novodolivka, this is where the Ukrainians started their offensive. They went down, and basically they went to the fields down here, but the Russians are in control of the high ground here, right? And so the Verba is in a low ground, so attacking Verba directly is fine in an elevation sense, but the Russians have control over the heights around Verba, so even if the Ukrainians manage to enter the village, they'll basically be fired upon and basically be squeezed out. So they're trying to attack here to capture these areas here, and that's why they've been advanced. They've advanced here, but they haven't taken the high ground here yet. Robotina is actually helped the Ukrainians a bit. They have captured the city, which is on equal footing with Novopokrovka, so the elevation isn't an issue. It's just that the deeper they go here, the Russians still control this high ground here. They could still shoot down from here. From here, they could shoot down here. So, again, they can't keep going south, because they'll just get into a bigger salient without securing the flanks, which is give them a bigger risk of getting cut off. So, basically, that's kind of why they haven't been able to advance. I could probably say the Ukrainian offensive might be over. They might try something I've been hearing rumors that they're consolidating for one final push before the rainy season starts in full. So we might see a renewed offensive here, but it might not. The Ukrainians might have just used up their, we could see the offensive probably lowering down. On the Velika Novosilica front, there's actually been a reduction in intensity in fighting here after a few weeks ago when they tried to attack Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk. The reason being is because the main assault troops in this area were the Marines. Um, and basically, the Marines were basically sent back to Kherson. Were not sent back, but were sent to the Kherson front because the Ukrainians are planning an offensive in that place for almost certainly. So basically, without the main assault Marine troops, which are the elite of Ukrainian troops here, basically now they just basically are trying to consolidate their positions here. However, there has been some advance on this front by the Russians. The Russians advanced north of Pryutia and kind of advanced into these areas here to consolidate a better position here. Because again, if the Ukrainians restart offensive operations here, if they ever do so again, before they keep going south to take Staromilivka here, which is the main goal of the Ukrainians tactically in this situation for now, they have to take these cities, Novodonetsk, Novomayorsk, Kremenchuk, on the western front, which they on the eastern front, which they tried but failed. But if they succeeded here, the next part would have been trying to attack Pryutia to secure the western flank. So the Russians attacking north to secure a more bigger buffer prevents the Ukrainians from. It will make it harder for the Ukrainians to try to secure the western flank. So no advances here, but but the Russians have made a little bit of a bigger buffer around this area, and that's kind of why they did it, to make it harder for the Ukrainians to, if they ever attack here again, which they will, to here and here, they made it a bit harder to take this village. On the Donetsk front, there's been it's been quiet. However, the more active part of the Donetsk front is in the Marinka area. They actually advanced a little bit here. The Russians haven't taken. It took a pre-war stronghold. This is basically, this area around Donetsk was the most heavily fortified area in Ukraine. It was deeply made with trenches. This was before the war, and so this was like a really hard nut to crack. That's why there has been very little advances here. Even though this has basically been the front line since the war started, there's been very little advances here because of how strong these fortifications are. However, the Russians this week managed to do a small assault and take a stronghold here. This map says it only took this area, but some other maps say they kind of basically took this area right here, basically where this first trench line is. And basically, again, the Russians have been focused on Krasnogorovka and Novomikhailovka here. Reason being is because, they're trying to basically push, again, the attacks on this area is to push Ukrainian artillery away from Donetsk, which has been shelled almost every other day. Basically, these terror attacks by the Ukrainians. So basically, that's the same reason for attacking in Avdiivka as well. They're trying to push the Ukrainians away from these pre-war fortifications and push them out to somewhere where it's less defended, and also makes the Ukrainians not be able to shell the city with impunity. So they've been trying to push in this area. They've been focusing here. They've been a lot of bombings, but no offensive operations as of yet, except for a small-scale assault that took a strong point here. On the Bakhmut front, this is actually a very interesting front. We're actually going to not talk about Klishevka, finally. We're going to be talking about the northern part, which has been quiet basically for the last month or two. And basically, the Russians actually restarted offensive operations here. A lot of Russian sources have basically said that the Russians have taken the village of Oreka-Vasilivka here. The entire village. So the Ukrainians are solidified around this area here and these three villages, and the Russians have solidified here. However, some other sources, some more neutral sources, have said that the Russians have they've taken the southern part of the village and like the center part of the village, but like this area right here, like kind of the northern part of the village is still kind of like in a gray zone, and the Russians still have to clear it before they could advance. Which I think is kind of basically true. I think they basically say they captured most of Oreka-Vasilivka, but not all of it technically. According to this map, I use this map because I like the way it's shown. I think it's one of the best maps. This map just shows the southern part taken, but I think they've also taken maybe the center part. But the northern part is probably still in like a gray zone. But if the Ukrainians have counterattacked, but they've been repelled according to sources, so if they don't manage to push the Russians out of here, then I could basically see this village being taken fully very soon. Now, why do they attack here? Let's look at the topographical map. Let's move here. This is in Russian, so it's kind of hard to find out exactly what I'm looking for. I'm trying to base it off memory here. Let's see. Bakhmut. Yes, it's, I believe this is it here, right? This is New York, I believe. Let me see. Give me a second. Let me go to... Yeah, here it is. Here's Bakhmut. So here's Oreka Vasilivka. Again, the purpose here is to try to secure these it's more important to take these kind of high grounds here because again the Russians are consolidated around Bakhmut here, but the Ukrainians are on the high ground, so that gives them an easier position to attack. However, if the Russians take the high ground, they could advance and be able to be on equal footing with the Ukrainians. So it's going to be I don't know if they'll attack directly here, but they might try to attack along this, this fortification here and break through here. And why are they attacking this? What's the purpose of going here? Well, they might do a small-scale operation to try to just reach the canal here, which will give them a better defensive line here. But I think if they're making a bigger push, and I think this might be in tandem with maybe, which we're going to talk about later in the Luhansk front, they might be trying to cut off the Seversk pocket here. Why? Well, if they attack northwest, they basically, if they follow this and basically reach the Seversky Donetsk River, attack basically here, take these villages, take this village, and reach here. Basically, if they attack here, they basically have the Seversk group cut off, and this will come in tandem with basically when the Russians do their main, probably what they're going to do, their main new offensive operation to reach the Oskol River. Because if that's successful, then basically the Russians will be here, and the Russians will be here. So basically this entire area will be in a pocket. So the Ukrainians will either have to just give this up to avoid surrounding, and then basically the Russians will be able to take Seversk without a fight for the most part. Or they stay here and fight, but they all get surrounded and, well, they eventually lose. So basically this might be in tandem to kind of cut off this as the Russians attack here. So that might be what the purpose of it is. So there's been some advances in the north. There's also been some kind of rumors that they've entered Vasilivka here, Vasola here. But there's not been as much sources confirming that as if Oreka Vasilivka. But they've been some sources saying they got closer to this, but the village hasn't been taken yet. So I'm not going to say they've taken this yet until we get more sources here. But basically, there's been some movement in this area by the Russians. But however, on the southern part, on the southern flank of Bakhmut, this is Ukrainian. The Ukrainians are on the offensive here. The Ukrainians have control of Klishivka and Andriivka, and the Russians basically in the last 2 weeks have consolidated around the rail line. And the Ukrainians have actually launched attacks this week to try to break through. They've entered the rail lines. They've been able to kind of enter, behind it, but they've been pushed back. So they've been doing assaults, but they haven't been able to consolidate their gains because they keep getting pushed back. So the Russians still hold this new defense line. Again, the main purpose of the Ukrainians here is to break this defense line and force the Russians to get back to Opana, Odrivka, Mikhailivka, Druvka, and so forth, to basically make a new front line. And basically the main purpose of this is to cut off the main highway that connects Gorlivka to Bakhmut. Cutting this highway is, obviously it's not, it's not like it cuts off the southern part of Bakhmut entirely, but it is the main artery of the southern defense part of Bakhmut. Because then if they take this, then the Russians will withdraw to Zaisova and Kadema, and basically then the southern part of Bakhmut will be basically mostly taken. But then again, they have to, if they want to surround Bakhmut and take it, the northern part is they need to take the northern part, which actually the Russians are advancing here, so it doesn't bode well for them to surround Bakhmut. The only hope they have is they somehow do a big breakthrough and threaten to like cut off the entire front here like this. But again, that's going to be a big ass since it took the Ukrainians 3 months to take these villages here, just these two villages. So again, it, in order to surround Bakhmut, they need the northern front, which they have no success in. The southern part, they took forever. They took them 3 months to take these two villages, and now they're trying to attack again, but still with no success this week. But they've been trying, so we'll have to keep an eye on how the Ukrainians advance on this front. On the Luhansk front, there hasn't been any advancements here per se, but I wanted to mention something here. So, over the last week, the Russians have basically bombed every single bridge on like the northern part of the Oskil River. So from this area here to like up here, all the main bridges have been destroyed, and they've also destroyed the pontoon bridges. They've they've also been saying they have one of their main reserve armies that they've deployed here, the 25th Combined Arms Army, and basically and from what I understand here, basically, is that the Russians are going to advance here. Basically, this is where the Russians do their main offensive operation. They might do a small-scale operation to reach the Oskil River. Again, I've mentioned this before, but once they reach the Seversky, Donetsk, and Oskil River, this is basically a natural defense point. Also, Kupiansk and Liman are vital logistic hubs to help support the offensive in Donbass. So this is a small-scale operation, which the Russians can do, and so it's just and all the actions the Russians have taken basically have shown that they might do an offensive operation here, so we'll have to take a look and see if that happens and how that plays out. On the Kherson front, there also hasn't been any advancements here, but however, the Russians have been basically doing massive attacks along the Dnieper River, specifically in this area right here, along Lvova and Burislav. They've basically been bombing this area with fab bombs every single day almost. They've also been bombing Nikolaev and Kryvyi and bombing ammo depots, planes. They've also actually been attacking long range. They destroyed a train that was deploying vehicles from Zaporozhye to Kherson. They blew up a train here. They also blew up a train, I forgot exactly where. I think somewhere here, I believe. I forgot where. But they also bombed another train, like, farther back. And basically, Russia has been increasing its long-range attacks. Basically, I mentioned this last week, the Ukrainians are going to probably try to do an offensive here to try to basically maybe change the odds of, maybe they hope to have the Russians withdraw their troops from Zaporozhye to halt a breakthrough here, and then that would allow the Ukrainians to break through here easier. I guess that's the idea. So, but the Russians are basically making it as hard as possible for the Ukrainians to consolidate and break through. So I guess that's kind of, I think, the goal of the Ukrainians. They've created like assault for a bunch of units. They've deployed the Marines here. They've reconstituted units into assault formations. They call them Normandy and Omaha. As I mentioned last time, the LARP is very out of control here. But basically, all those signs point that the Ukrainians aren't going to do an offensive operation here, unless maybe the Russians have disrupted it to such an extent that they basically aren't able to do it. But the Ukrainians definitely have plans, if they're able to break through here. In terms of things outside the front line, basically there's been not much. The Russians continue their missile strikes throughout the country. They've been increased. The number of FPV drones for the September is around like 550, which is double, almost actually more than double. It was in August, and August was double than it was in July. And so basically there's been an exponential growth almost in FPV drone strikes. Along with, we've seen an increase in missile strikes with Iskanders, which we haven't seen in a while. Basically, Russia has been increasing its missile strikes. Its fab bombs have also increased dramatically. We've seen, so basically, the Russians have been bombing Ukraine, bombing, factories mostly. Basically, consolidate. Basically, where the Ukrainians basically use to build to repair their equipment, and also in the rear in this area to bomb ammo depots, trains, and so forth. And so, and the Ukrainians have also increased their attacks. They've done massive drone attacks in Kursk and Belgorod. There was also an attempt by the Ukrainians to launch a uh, a uh, a raid on these border villages. These aren't really the same reason why when they attack drones, when they send drones to Moscow, they don't really do anything. They're just there to say, hey, we also could attack you if you attack us. But it's not strategic if it really in any way. Uh, as compared to the Russians when they bomb, say, the Kharkov, like the big Kharkov tank repair plant, which basically all the Ukrainian vehicles that are in the Luhansk front, if they get damaged, they get sent here, repaired, and then they can be sent back. But if they bomb the factory, that's gonna be hard for them to be able to repair the tanks, for example. So that's a thing that actually helps the Russians strategically. Raiding a village on the border doesn't do anything. But yeah, so that's been the frontline summary for this week. I hope you enjoyed. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. So aim high, wander on, from America, with Russian love.